What if the person you show the world isn't you at all? What if every smile, every "I'm fine," every time you stayed quiet was just another lie you told to survive? They told you to be yourself. But the moment you got too real, too loud, too different, they tried to shut you down. So you learned. You learned to shrink, to filter your thoughts, to hide the parts of you that made people uncomfortable. But here's the truth they never said out loud. The world doesn't reject you because you're broken. It rejects you because you're unpredictable, because you don't fit the script, and deep down, you know it. There's a version of you you've been burying, a voice you've been silencing, a side of you that doesn't want approval. It wants freedom. The question is, how much longer are you going to keep it locked away? Somewhere along the way, you were taught a rule, a silent rule, the rule no one says out loud, but everyone follows. Fit in. Stay agreeable. Don't be too different. Because the moment you step outside that line, the moment you stop playing the version of yourself they understand, you become a problem. Society doesn't reward truth, it rewards comfort, predictability, obedience, and if you're too real, too raw, too unapologetic, they don't try to understand you, they label you crazy, difficult, too much. That's where Joker comes in, not as a hero, not as someone to copy blindly, but as a symbol of what happens when someone stops apologizing, stops explaining, stops shrinking. He doesn't ask for acceptance. He doesn't bend to expectations. He is exactly what he is, without permission. And that's what makes people uncomfortable, because deep down, they see what they're not brave enough to be. This isn't about chaos. This isn't about destruction. This is about something far more dangerous, becoming who you really are, even if the world doesn't like it. It didn't start today. It started when you were a kid, when you laughed too loud and someone told you to be quiet, when you asked too many questions and someone told you to stop, when you showed emotion and someone said you were being dramatic. That's when it began. Not the growth, but the editing. Little by little, you learned what was acceptable, how to speak, how to behave, how to think. You weren't discovering who you are. You were being programmed into who you should be. Say the right things, act the right way. Don't stand out too much, because standing out comes with a cost, judgment, and as that fear grows, something inside you starts to shrink. You hesitate before speaking, you overthink every move, you filter your personality until it becomes safe, not real, just safe. You start choosing approval over truth, comfort over honesty, acceptance over authenticity. And the scary part is, you don't even notice it happening. The mask becomes normal. You smile when you don't feel like it. You agree when you actually disagree. You stay silent when something inside you is screaming to be heard. And over time, that version of you becomes so polished, so perfect that people start liking it. They praise it. They accept it. They reward it. But it's not you. It's a version of you designed for them, a character, a performance, a carefully constructed illusion built to avoid rejection. And the real you, the raw thoughts, the unfiltered emotions, the parts that don't fit neatly into expectations, they stay hidden, locked away, because you were taught that being yourself is risky, that being real might cost you everything. So you keep pretending, not because you want to, but because somewhere along the way, you were made to believe you had no choice. But what happens when someone refuses to wear the mask? There's a moment, rare, uncomfortable, almost terrifying, when someone stops asking for permission, stops checking if they are acceptable, stops adjusting themselves to fit the room. That's the moment everything changes. That's the mindset of the Joker, not the chaos you see on the surface, but the decision underneath it. He doesn't chase approval. He doesn't wait to be understood. He doesn't shrink himself to make others comfortable. He accepts every part of who he is, the light, the dark, the parts most people hide. And that's what makes him dangerous, because authenticity, real, unfiltered authenticity, can't be controlled. People can predict someone who follows rules. They can manage someone who seeks validation. They can manipulate someone who fears rejection. But someone who has nothing to prove, someone who doesn't need approval, That person becomes unpredictable, and unpredictability scares people. So what do? They label it. They call it arrogance. They call it rebellion. They call it madness. Crazy. Not because it actually is, but because it doesn't fit inside their system. Because it reminds them of something they've buried in themselves. The truth is, most people aren't afraid of being rejected. They're afraid of being seen without the mask, without the filters, without the performance. That kind of exposure feels like risk, but it's also where power begins. Because the moment you stop needing validation, you take back control. You stop negotiating your identity. You stop explaining your existence. You stop apologizing for being different. And suddenly you're not weak anymore, you're free. And here's the part most people don't understand. Being too much isn't a flaw, it's strength. Too intense, too bold, too honest, too real. Those aren't weaknesses. They're traits that haven't been tamed, traits that refuse to be diluted just to fit expectations. And when you embrace that, fully, unapologetically, you stop living for reactions, you start living from truth. But freedom comes at a price. Freedom sounds powerful, but it's not comfortable. The moment you stop apologizing, the moment you stop adjusting yourself to fit others, things begin to change. Not just inside you, but around you. People start to look at you differently. Some get confused. Some get uncomfortable. Some quietly step back. Because not everyone can handle the real you. They were used to the version that agreed, the version that stayed quiet, the version that made them feel safe. But now, you're unpredictable. You speak your mind. You don't follow the script. You don't play the role they assigned to you. And that breaks their expectations. So they call you different, difficult, cold, detached. But what they're really saying is, you're no longer controllable. And that comes with a cost. You will be misunderstood. People will assume things about you that aren't true. They'll create stories to make sense of your change, not because they know you, but because they can't accept what they don't understand. And yes, some people will leave. Not everyone is meant to stay when you grow. Some connections were built on the version of you that no longer exists, and when that version disappears, so do they. It feels like loss. It feels like isolation, like you're standing alone while everyone else stays where they are. But here's the truth most people avoid. That loneliness, it's not weakness. It's transition. Because when you strip away the fake, what remains is real, and real is rare. Weakness is needing constant approval, needing everyone to agree, needing validation just to feel secure. Strength is different. Strength is standing firm even when no one claps, even when no one understands, even when it costs you comfort. Strength is choosing truth over acceptance. And the world notices that, not immediately, not loudly. But over time, it does, because people may resist what they don't understand, but they respect what doesn't bend. They respect the person who stays solid in who they are, who doesn't fold under pressure, who doesn't trade identity for approval. Even if they don't admit it, they feel it, and that's where influence begins. Not from trying to impress everyone, but from being so real, so grounded, that people can't ignore it, even if it creates enemies. Because authenticity doesn't guarantee love, but it guarantees power. So the question is, are you ready to stop apologizing? There comes a point when you have to make a decision, not about them, about you. How much longer are you going to shrink just to fit into spaces that were never built for you? How much longer are you going to edit your personality just to be easier to accept? Because the truth is simple. You were never meant to be understood by everyone. You were never meant to be liked by everyone. And the moment you accept that, everything changes. This is the rule. Never apologize over who you are. Not your thoughts, not your voice, not your intensity, not the parts of you that don't fit neatly into someone else's expectations. You don't need to soften your edges just because they don't know how to handle sharpness. You don't need to dim your light just because it makes others uncomfortable. And you definitely don't need to explain yourself to people who already decided not to understand you. Confidence doesn't come from perfection. It doesn't come from fixing every flaw or becoming some ideal version of yourself. It comes from acceptance, from looking at everything you are, the strengths, the flaws, the contradictions, and saying, "This is me." No filters, no performance, no apology. And when you reach that point, something shifts. You stop hesitating before you speak. You stop overthinking every move. You stop seeking permission to exist as yourself. You become direct, clear, unshaken. You say what you mean. You stand where you believe. You move without constantly checking who approves. That's control, not control over others, but control over yourself. And that's real power. So speak your truth, even if your voice shakes at first, even if people look at you differently, even if it costs you comfort. Stop explaining yourself to everyone. You are not a problem that needs to be justified. You are not a story that needs to be approved. You are a reality that exists whether they accept it or not. And most importantly, embrace what makes you different. Because that difference? That's your edge. That's the part of you that refuses to be replaced. The part that can't be copied. The part that makes you, you. This is where most people turn back. They feel the pressure. They feel the resistance. And they retreat into the mask. But not you. Not anymore. You've seen what it costs to pretend. You've felt what it's like to hide. And now, you know the truth. Being yourself isn't weakness. It's rebellion. It's power. It's freedom. And once you taste that freedom, you don't go back. The truth is, the world was never afraid of your flaws. It was afraid of your honesty. Afraid of the moment you stop pretending. Afraid of the moment you stop asking for permission. Afraid of the moment you become something it can't control. Because copies are safe. Copies follow rules. Copies stay predictable. Copies never challenge anything. But an original disrupts everything. And that's what you are, underneath the mask. Not broken, not too much, not something that needs to be fixed, something real, something powerful. So don't water yourself down just to be accepted. Don't trade your identity for temporary approval. Don't go back to being someone you had to force yourself to be. Because the moment you stop apologizing is the moment you take your power back. The moment you stop explaining is the moment you become undeniable. And the moment you fully accept who you are is the moment you become free. So remember this, the world doesn't need another copy. It fears the original. So ask yourself, are you still pretending or are you finally free?